Hey folks, I have read your teaching philosophy papers today and have provided feedback to you in on your paper using the little post-it notes or highlighted elements, as well as an occasional comment in the rubric. Most of your feedback is going to be actually on your paper. Be sure that you're taking the time to read that feedback. It is so important, especially at this juncture of your MSN journey, that you really are taking developmental feedback and applying that feedback to future improvements. And this includes APA formatting, as well as comments about your content. This assignment for me is one of those critical assignments. I think it is so important that individual educators have their own idea about what it means to teach, what it means to help our students learn, what the theoretical underpinning of what we do is, and then how we can actually visualize what we think we believe in actual practice. So it's one of those really cool reflective exercises that makes you pause and think, why do I do what I do? And am I intentional about doing it? I was so tickled when I read many of your papers that said, I hadn't really thought about why I did it. I just kind of trial and errored or figured my way through it. And folks, that is such a common experience with novice educators. So often we take clinical experts and then we drop them in the educational field and we expect them to perform at the same level of competence and excellence that they were as clinicians. And if you're in an educator position, in a formal educator position, you know that that is exactly not true. That we may be fantastic clinicians, but when we start, we're a hot mess trying to get our feet under us and trying to figure out, okay, how do I do what I need to do? And we're so busy trying to figure out the how that sometimes we don't pause and think about the why. And a lot of what we do is not intentional, it's incidental or it's accidental. And much like nursing, it's done by drift. It's done by the things we bump into that we think, oh, well, maybe that's a good idea. And unfortunately, we, in our early practice, until we really begin to fine-tune our practice, we practice on our students. And we inadvertently are not always at our best. My hope is that as you process this assignment, as you really spend some time thinking about, why do I do what I do? And is it theoretically appropriate? Do I have some foundation under me that supports what I do? I can tell you, my clinical background is in mental health, so I feel like I was a really good mental health nurse. And then I went into leadership, so I thought, okay, I've got these skills. But when I came into the classroom, so much of that clinical practice and so much of those leadership skills were very focused in a clinical world. So I had to go into my tool bag and think about, what do I know from clinical practice? What are the skills that are transferable? How do I take the things I do know and transfer them into my role of being a nurse educator? Something else that several of you all talked about in your papers was the importance of being a clinical expert and how the importance of maintaining practice to validate or have the veracity of being perceived to be qualified in the clinical arena. I can tell you that the balance of educating and maintaining practice is super challenging for nurses. Very rarely are educational environments supportive of giving you time off to practice. So you wind up working tremendous schedules as educators and then cobbling together a few days here and there, trying to just keep your foot into the clinical world. So I appreciate the ideals that, yes, it's fantastic to be able to do that, but know that that's a real challenge. And normally the challenge comes from not having work release from your primary employer in an academic setting to maintain clinical practice. So if you haven't officially accepted a role in clinical practice, begin to think about how you're going to ask those questions during an interview about how do I keep my toes in the water while I'm still working for you in an educator role. A little easier to finesse if you're in a hospital setting because it's all right there. But just anticipate that. One of your classmates touched on an element for the role of teaching and learning that I haven't seen very often, but I was really, really impressed by this. Your classmate, Eric, he wrote this. He said, creativity is what helps students think outside the box and critically think. It's also what helps students to be proactive rather than reactive, which can also save lives. These elements, in my opinion, are what will help provide an environment that is optimal for successful teaching. Psalms chapter 32, verse 8 tells us, I will instruct you and teach you you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eyes on you. Jesus taught us to be leaders in our faith and providing counsel to the rest of the world. Our children are our future, and we must hold to the principles set forth by Jesus and create an environment that brings his value in teaching to life. Eric did such a lovely job of connecting the value of creativity with our role as educators and our calling to not just teach, but to teach in an alignment with our Christian worldview. When we think about creativity, I want you to be thinking about innovation, and I want you to be aware that if you're stepping your toes for the first time in nursing education, that there is a huge amount of innovation that's occurring within our practice environment. One of our challenges is there's such a tremendous pace of innovative change in healthcare and then innovative change within the education world that the two are not always in sync. And sometimes we can become so overwhelmed by innovation, we shut down and we get locked in what we want to do and we refuse to innovate anymore because we're exhausted. And sometimes we become reactive, as Eric was saying, to everything around us, and we begin to pull at every little innovation and we exhaust our students. Be sure that as you're planning your teaching activities and you're planning your strategies and you're looking at technologies and software that support your practice, that you're not picking up every new and shiny thing and testing them out on your student, that you're intentional about picking the things that tap into the creativity of your student in your own practice, and that you're thoughtful about what innovation looks like. Eric is spot on that when we're creative in the classroom, when we teach our students to be creative, that's really where kind of that rubber hits the road and innovation occurs, and we want that, but we want it to be predictable and intentional innovation, not just picking up every new and shiny thing and fiddling with it while using our students or our learners as our test tube students. So we want to be thoughtful about that. Okay, that's the general gist from this week. APA wise, just want to point out, as you are working towards these practicum courses that just like a lot of, I guess, other courses, they're still writing intensive, know that we need to see you working towards writing concisely, and that includes your structure of your sentences first. Write complete sentences that are concisely worded. If you're getting ready to use a comma and add a conjunction, you be thoughtful about, is this really necessary? Can I not break up this lengthy, wobbly sentence into 2 or 3 more meaningful sentences? And then when you write concise sentences, then work towards writing concise paragraphs. Good paragraphs are normally 5 or 6 sentences long, and they maintain the same theme. And it's a core theme, not an overarching theme, but a core theme. And then when you're done with a good paragraph, you end that and then start another paragraph. It's not uncommon in a paper that has a common theme for your paragraphs to have a thread that runs through them, but you want to be thoughtful about first writing concise sentences, then writing concise paragraphs, and then writing concise papers. They're all interlinked. This becomes important if you're ever going to write a grant paper, or if you're ever going to do a business proposal, or if you are ever going to write for publication. Editors do not want to read every thought you have, even if your thoughts are cogent and relevant and well worded. They only want to know the meats and the nuts and bolts of the meats and potatoes. So begin to think critically as you write your paper, how you write it, and then go back and think, okay, how do I write? How do I review this critically to make sure that first my sentences are concise and that those concise sentences are organized in concise paragraphs, and that all of that comes together to being a well-written, well-developed, not wordy, not wandering, not loosely associated paper. This is an important writing skill, and I do want you to be intentional and thoughtful about that. I think that's like the 10th time I've used intentional and thoughtful. Apparently these are the words of the day. Okay. I'm looking at my notes trying to figure out what on earth I have written. Using level headings. At this level in your course, you should not be turning in any paper that does not have level headings threaded throughout. Level 1 and level 2, there you will not have a paper. I can't think of a paper in any of the next 3 courses that will be short enough that you will not need to incorporate level 1 and level 2 headings. As you move forward, level 1, level 2, and level 3 headings are likely. Anticipate that. Do not turn in a paper that is not using level headings appropriately, and begin the practice now. When you get to 620, your final capstone paper is a doozy. So my encouragement is to begin to practice those skills now, because it's expected. Think about the last time you read a article that was published in a journal. Those articles are broken up by headings that organize the writing and organize the thinking of the author. It also guides your reading. Think about the last time you read an article and a section that went on and on and on and on. You began to skim normally after the first paragraph or 2. Think about the last email you got from someone, and it was this long diatribe of stuff. If you're anything like me, you probably went, why is this email this long? And then you read the first paragraph, and then you begin to skim the paragraphs to see, do I really need to read this? People approach papers that way, which is why journals are really adamant about length. So when we think about being disciplined about organizing your paper, writing concisely, using headings, using good professional writing skills is a key to that element. Okay, enough about that. Let's talk briefly about next week. You've got a discussion board that has you exploring a single activity that touches all 3 learning domains. So your affective domain, your cognitive domain, and your psychomotor domain. Have fun with this, folks. Before you start writing your discussion board, sit down with a piece of paper or a blank Word document and just type out some ideas. What are some things you've seen done? What are some things you've done? And think about what domain was used in this assignment, and how can I tweak it to pull in another domain to make it a full comprehensive domain. The reason this is a discussion board is because one of the things I have found is that you guys do some really cool things, and you have had some really neat experiences. So it's in the discussion board forum, so you can steal one another's ideas. Our best source of development sometimes is our peer group. So I really want you to read through what your peers are saying that they've done that touches on all 3 of those domains. Those are the best of the best assignments. They're also the most fun to teach. They're the ones that students don't roll their eyes over. So be thoughtful about this before you do your discussion board. Be concise in your discussion board. The idea is to tell us an activity, define the domains, and move forward. Don't make this harder than it is. Your last draft of your goals and objectives is also due at the end of this week. As soon as I'm done with this video, sometime this evening, I'm going to start looking at the drafts that are posted in Blackboard. So my hope is if you have a draft, I'm going to try to work on those tonight and over the next couple of days to get you some feedback, especially if you're waiting to get started in clinical. Understand that you should plan to have at least one meeting that accrues practicum hours in the week before your practicum log is due. You've got to have something to write about. So if you're still waiting for final approval, you're in good company. That's okay. Just look at your calendar and plan. Go ahead and get something on the calendar. So even if you just have a couple of hours and you can only do one log, you need a grade, so you need to plan proactively. The other thing to remember is lots of you are going to run out of road because summer sessions end quickly. So if you front-loaded a lot of your hours, know that you also have another thing. You've got all these practicum logs that you've got to do, plus you have a teaching activity in I think it's week 7, week 8, that you've actually got to teach your students something. So you may have to do that, plan accordingly, and do that before it's actually due in that week to get it done while you still have learners in your practicum environment. So begin to think critically about what this looks like, plan your time accordingly, anticipating that these things are on the horizon. All right, I think I have talked your ear off, and it is way past time for yummies here. As you can see, the puppy over my shoulder has given up her charge of staring at me, wanting to be fed. We are, thank you for the well wishes in my travels. We had a wonderful time. We are back from California, so we took a train from DC to Chicago, switched trains, and then went from Chicago all the way just outside of San Francisco and stayed in San Francisco for 2 days. So we took forever to get on West Coast time, then stayed there a day too long because then we really got into West Coast time. So we are still trying to figure out, what our biological clocks are doing. So it was absolutely worth it. So if you have not had a chance to ever take a train trip, please take a train trip. best time. Okay, be in touch. Let me know if you have questions or concerns. Know that I am here. I am just a phone call or a click away. I hope you guys are having a good week. Take care.